type of education that I would like to see is one that is radically different from what we've got now.
The integrated schools now exist. They came into existence in 1981. It's a little bit more about them at the moment. But if you look at the Catholic schools in Northern Ireland, virtually all the pupils in Catholic schools are Catholic. And in Protestant schools, the proportion of Catholic pupils who go to them is very small.
For me, a Catholic or a Protestant is someone who may have a faith in the church, but in Northern Ireland it doesn't necessarily mean that. A Protestant is someone who gets labelled because they're a Protestant, or labels themselves as that, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it's a faith or a religion. It becomes a label of convenience as opposed to a religious thing.
Children from better off homes go to music, they go to dance, they go to football, they go to things that aren't so segregated. Our children tend to just mix within their own community.
So we're here in Northern Ireland because we are studying how contentious topics like, in this case, the Troubles in the 1960s and 70s are taught in secondary schools, and how the segregated school system can balance teaching a joined history rather than two separate versions.
Before we left on our trip, we learned about the history of the conflict in our class. Our professor, Kimberly Cal-Myers, talked about events from the past up until today.
And you'll hear people talk about, oh, this is a Catholic pub, or this is a Catholic school, or this is a Catholic shop, or this is a Catholic neighborhood, or this is a Catholic sporting center. As if, the pub walked down the street once a week and went to church, in the Catholic church. It's Catholic in the sense that people who go there are Catholic. It's not Catholic in its ethos, right? It's not Catholic in the sense that it is subordinate to the church. That's something that's very important, is that you get a lot of leadership structures that are really quite pointedly challenges to the leadership structure of the church.
The island of Ireland is divided into two countries, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is a part of the United Kingdom. This division perpetuates a lot of the conflict within the population of Northern Ireland when it comes to matters of politics and national identity. The nationalists in the country support having a united Ireland, while the Unionists want to remain part of the United Kingdom. This division, though, extends further into the lives of the people, where the Catholic majority aligns with the nationalists and shares an Irish Republican identity, while many of the Protestant minorities support the Unionists and identify as culturally British. These social divides have led to discrimination and violence from both parties, creating the divided society that exists today. Though Catholics are a majority on the island of Ireland, they are a minority in Northern Ireland. This means that historically, Protestants have been a privileged majority from the time of William of Orange.
And that civil rights movement, I think it's important for our visitors from the United States to remember, that civil rights movement was based on the civil rights movement in the United States by African Americans in relation to demanding equality in terms of the franchise, demanding equality in terms of jobs, demanding equality in terms of citizenship. And the reason why that particular campaign inspired people here was because we were suffering under similar disabilities. We were suffering from the same inequalities that people were in the United States.
So you have this whole propaganda. The whole thing about living in a conflict is you're just surrounded by propaganda. And the propaganda is to turn everything into a simple narrative. So we are good, they are bad.
And one of the ways in which you actually didn't engage in violence is whenever people said, we are the good people, they are the bad people, and you're thinking to yourself, but if you're such good people, why did you kneecap my friend for breaking into a car? If we're the good people, why are you going around shooting 7-year-old Catholic women? If we're the good people, why are you brutalising anybody who says that they don't agree with you? And similarly in the other community, people I met were saying the same thing. So how are we the good people? Well, how are we better than any other people? And of course, it's that hypothesis of contact. It's when you meet people, these things start to change and change very, very quickly. And of course, they change in ways which are appropriate.
There are three main types of state-funded schools in Northern Ireland: maintained, where the school is mainly Catholic; controlled, where the school is mainly Protestant; and integrated. Proposed reforms call for shared education, where 2 or more schools come together to share classes or activities. The government has endorsed some form of shared education for controlled and maintained schools.
Would it be possible to create porous boundaries between these schools so that students move between schools to take classes, teachers move between schools to teach classes or to work with one another? Would it be possible to create local collaborative networks of schools?
In schools like the 3 we visited, most children are not exposed to others with different views, which only perpetuates the underlying ideas behind segregated education. When students go to university, they are usually shocked to be so intertwined with those who have different views. Some students had never known the true difference in beliefs before they entered university.
So my kids come home, and my son came home the other week and he was at school, and somebody said to him, the IRA never kills civilians. That's really dangerous to get that idea into society. That's really, really dangerous. And I sit with friends of mine I grew up with, and they go, no, everybody we killed, they were all provies. And you went, no, they weren't. They were like just working class people who were unfortunately walking down the street from the chip shop, and one of you got out of the car and shot them in the back of the head. That is not a member of the IRA. You were twice as likely, if you were a loyalist, you were twice as likely to be killed by a loyalist than you were by a Republican. And if you were a Republican, you were twice as likely to be killed by a Republican than you were by a loyalist. So these things we have to deal with, because these types of that type of data, that sort of intellectual understanding of it, will change arguments.
Both of Jade and James both were talking about how they didn't feel uncomfortable at all, like in their student teaching or in the future, talking about these issues with their students, and they said it's probably kind of a generational thing, that they're not as close to the conflict as their parents were in their parents' generation, so you don't feel that as much as a personal connection to it, so maybe it's not as difficult to bring up.
After speaking with politicians and government officials, we decided to head to schools for site visits. In this, we got to see the teaching of this divided history curriculum in person.
So right now we're at Lagan College, which is the first integrated school in Northern Ireland, and we're going to sit in on some history classes that are talking about contentious topics and the Troubles. We spoke with a few students studying education at Queen's University. We discussed their experiences in the education system, their feelings about integrated and shared education, and their thoughts about the future of education in Northern Ireland.
My children. I want to see an education system that is integrated. I want to see one that's diverse and that allows discussion, that allows development of skills and development of deliberation.
I'm a big supporter of the Northern Irish education system. I think it's very strong, it produces good results. I think the content within the curriculum is very good. So if I was ever to have children, I would definitely want them to undergo Northern Irish education with the revised curriculum as it is today.
For me, I prefer whether it's closest to me and not really take into any account of like Catholic, Protestant, like that sort of divide. I actually like the integrated, like the schooling system. So for me, I would prefer that. I just think if you let kids create their own opinions or views and things like that instead of forcing upon them, I think it might be that the integrated school system might have more of an opportunity to achieve that than segregated schools.
Yeah. So he's going to have to overthink. Content that students are learning that is the problem. Is it the ethos of the school, right? So that they're only associating with people who are like them and they never meet each other until the university level? Is it parental choice? Is it, the teachers are swimming upstream. They're expected to do this amazing thing that, that is so different from what the students themselves, the kids themselves are experiencing, outside of that.
However, the solution isn't as cut and dried as we first thought. Some people want to maintain the status quo that they have had all of their lives.
You know, it is the way forward. There's no doubt about it.
Because shared education is a good first step.
Shared education is a very good first step, but it actually needs to be happening much younger than our children, because our children become entrenched. By the time they're a teenager and they've been listening to the opinions of their parents and their grannies and all of that, and their community, I'm not saying they're entrenched, you can't change them, but they just go through that little phase. Whereas primary school children don't know the difference, but then there's the danger. I have a niece who actually did shared education and came home and asked her granny, was she a Catholic or a Protestant? Because she didn't know. The child was about 10 at the time.
So, from my experience, the Catholic Church has ownership of a lot of schools, and most education of young Catholics about their religion comes through schools. There's no infrastructure within churches or provision for young Catholics to learn about their faith outside of school, really. Churches don't have that set up. They don't have Sunday schools. They don't have youth workers, really, in Catholic churches. So schools are very much the place where Catholics learn about their faith. So I think that's one of the difficulties, one of the barriers for the Catholic Church to embrace integrated education, is that they feel that all these young people will not have access to any education about their own faith, because there's no infrastructure outside of schools for that.
I sent all my children to Catholic schools because I believe that the Catholic ethos is very, very important for any child's formation. And I think the religious ethos is important. But there's also a cultural ethos which I think is important as well. It emanates from the Catholic belief system.
In Northern Ireland, most students take an exam at around age 11 that decides whether they will go to a more academic grammar school or a more general high school. The government has officially banned this exam, but many schools continue to use their own versions.
Here, at a very early age, at 11 years old, you take a test that essentially determines what career you're going to go into, what you want to study for the rest of your life, where like you can compare that to like our SATs that determine what school you're going to end up going to depending on your score, but it's such a big pressure on these kids at 11 years old that are trying to decide what they're going to do with their lives.
We spoke with politicians, civil servants, and students who voice a wide variety of opinions on how to deal with the current education system.
But if we take our education system as a whole, I still believe in some form of selection or streaming. I think it does get problematic teaching complete all ability, particularly when you go to secondary school. And that broadens into even just kids and young people have been interested in different subjects, and it's how do we tap into that?
I totally disagree with that. I done the 11 plus back in the day, and are you familiar with the background of it?
Yeah, it's to get into grammar school,
yeah.
Right? Okay.
So I failed, I got a D, and I went to a Catholic contained secondary school, and I got just as good results as grammar schools. I came to Queen's University, and now I'm a teacher, essentially. So from my own experience, I think I contradicted the system, and I don't think that children should be put under that amount of pressure at such a young age.
I don't like it personally. I don't think that you can, I don't think assessment works for everybody. I probably one of those people. And for the 11 plus for me, I came out with a D. It doesn't really show you where you're going to end up in the final place. It's just different people are at different stages, and I don't think that you can apply like an assessment or apply to everybody.
Ultimately, for me personally, I think there needs to be a revolution in education. Education, I think, the education system we're working on now is probably about 150 years out of date, I would say, because it's this sort of this wheel of producing people who've got this certain type of skills. But the 21st century's changed so much that people need more than just what maths and science. What they need is communication skills. They need skills in how to use technology. They need skills in how to deliberate and deal with other people.
In Northern Ireland, we met with representatives of the curriculum committee and attended classes at schools. Each school has to teach about religious education, the history of Northern Ireland, and citizenship. One problem, though, is that teachers don't have strict curriculum requirements, which results in a biased learning experience. NGOs, like the Nerve Center, who we worked with, have become increasingly important to provide specific curriculum for teachers.
What do we mean by shared education? Well, shared education, we're talking about it's more than just sharing facilities. It's deeper than that. I suppose what we're interested in from our side of the house here in SEA as an educational body is promoting the notion of shared education through the curriculum, because the curriculum is one of the great vehicles for bringing young people together. So in other words, if we take, for example, citizenship, which I started off talking about, the idea would be that a school who might be seen as a Catholic school could work together with pupils and teachers from a Protestant school, come together and work on some sort of joint curriculum type project. So the curriculum is a great vehicle for shared education and bringing pupils together.
We run a programme called Teaching Divided Histories, or we did for the last 3 years, which is a European peace-funded programme which works to develop cross-curricular pathways and routeways into learning about conflict and contested and divided histories for schools across Northern Ireland, secondary schools across Northern Ireland. And the way we've worked to do that is through digital media. So teachers are trained by us in how to use filmmaking, digital image manipulation, Photoshop or GIMP, programs like Comic Life or Comic Creator, Audacity, iMovie, to edit sounds, images and video to allow young people to start to create their own content around conflict. So they learn about conflict and then they actually make some kind of digital product.
One of the major problems that education reformists face is that there's too much leeway in the curriculum. The current curriculum is flexible and outcome-based rather than content-based. This allows teachers to choose what topics they teach and for prejudice to take precedence over quality learning and the promotion of a more peaceful society.
We surveyed the schools using the Teaching Divided Histories, the Nerve Center's curriculum for the teaching of contentious topics. Although we faced response rate issues, the information we gathered was overwhelmingly in favor of the continued and expanded use of Teaching Divided Histories. The only complaint from schools using the curriculum was that the technology and software packages could be expensive after trial periods and were sometimes difficult to use. However, teachers felt that the Nerve Center's training and support of the curriculum was excellent.
Generally, students enjoyed the curriculum's varied and multimedia approach to learning. Teachers reported no hostility between students in the teaching of contentious topics using Teaching Divided Histories. Using the Nerve Center's curriculum, students are more engaged and show more respect and empathy in historical context. 100% of our respondents recommend Teaching Divided Histories to other schools and educators.
The difficulty is that we have such things as parental preference, parental choice. We have a system, a sector of education here which is under the ownership of the Roman Catholic Church. So we've got what people in the integrated sector themselves would call vested interests. Now, how do you deal with that?
And it is in providing a political culture which is right-centred, human rights-centred, civil rights-centred. It is providing that political culture and that political context that we can move on our society and prepare the broken relationships that exist here between Catholic and Protestant, nationalist and unionist.
The problem is that 93% of kids in Northern Ireland will go to segregated schools.
Integrated schools have been around since 1980, but they have not caught on.
Shared education, where schools are required to share space and bring students together for discussions, is now government policy.
The challenges to the educational system in Northern Ireland are multiple, including:
Number 1. Some parents and kids value the religious ethos of the schools.
2. There are no structures for religious education outside of the schools.
3. Institutions like churches have vested interests and resources in the current system.
4. Funding is required to make shared education work.
Number 5, educational quality and attainment are uneven. Students go to schools based on their academic performance, which reinforces the socioeconomic hierarchy that currently is in place.
Number 6, flexibility in the Northern Ireland curriculum allows schools to teach different content to the students, which sometimes leads to them learning different versions of the past, which will shape their identity and their ideas of the present.
Education reform will have to address all of these issues for the people of Northern Ireland to have a chance at a lasting peace.